Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here for part 3 of my Best of the Year series. I'm going to have links in the description and in the cards for the rest of my videos, but today I'm focusing on the best science fiction and fantasy that was published in 2020. I have 10 books here. I have 4 fantasy books and 6 science fiction. Yes, I realize that it would look nicer if it was 5 and 5, but honestly it's a little bit representative of my reading because I do read more science fiction, and so when I went to compile my list, I did want to feature more sci-fi books. So I'm going to mix this up and actually start with my fantasy books and then move on to my science fiction. These are ranked by category, ending with my favorite science fiction book, which is my favorite book of the entire 10 that I put together here. I'm really excited to talk about these. I'm going to keep the synopsises brief and more so focus on why I love them so much. Even if you're a horror fan, I definitely encourage you to keep watching because there's a little bit of everything in this list, and let's get started. First, starting at number 4 for fantasy, we have Beneath the Rising by Premi Muhammad. This I'm classifying as fantasy, but it also has elements of science fiction and horror, which you know I love. And so this follows 2 childhood best friends that reunite as adults. And the one is a genius and has just discovered a reactor technology that allows her to make clean energy. However, in doing so, she may have accidentally ripped a hole in the universe and is causing these cosmic creatures to be unleashed on humanity. That's the basic synopsis, and I really enjoyed this book for several reasons. One being the friendship between these 2 characters. I really like getting to see their backstory. You get to see that they come from different classes, and the child prodigy, has a lot of privilege. She is a young, beautiful white woman, and her friend is of a marginalized group. He is quite poor. He has to take care of his family, and because of that has really had to deal with a lot of struggles that have held him back from perhaps reaching his own full potential. And as I mentioned, I love that this book definitely delves into horror, specifically cosmic horror, which is more fantastical than my personal preferences. But this book just had so many elements of diversity, such a strong relationship at the center of the story, that I really did love this one. It's one of the few books on this list that I did a separate review for, and in my opinion is one of the most underhyped books that came out in 2020. So highly recommend, watch my further review, decide if it's for yourself, and I would love to see more people checking this one out. Next, at number 3 for fantasy, we have Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is the sequel to Founderside. Keeping this all spoiler-free, this essentially is an urban type fantasy that is set in another world and follows a young woman who has the ability to perceive different aspects of objects when she touches them. And what I like most about this fantasy world is the magic system, which is a harder one and specifically is very similar to something like coding, which is something that speaks very closely to my heart because I do have a little bit of experience coding in the real world. And so I really enjoy the relationships in this one, the banter between the characters. There is a lot of humor that goes into this book, and I really think that these books are just entertaining. The second book had a fantastic villain who is perhaps over the top, but in the best possible way. I love a big baddie, and this one definitely delivered that. If you like the first book, you are guaranteed to like the second. I thought it was a really strong sequel that did not suffer from second book slump. Now at number 2, we have Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon Ha Lee, which is a standalone story that follows a non-binary artist who is commissioned by the government to fix a dragon construct that is not working properly. This, like the last book I mentioned, is one with a hard magic system. In this one, the artists have to draw symbols on things, and very similar to coding once again, give these constructs different instructions. I love the magic. I love the characters. There's a lot of great diversity in this book, both of different cultures, because it is very much inspired by the own author's Korean descent. And of course, you also get that sexual or gender diversity, which I always love to see in my SFF or any other book I'm reading, to be honest. And this one just absolutely captured my attention. It is a standalone, so you do get a complete story, and it was just fun and enjoyable and thoughtful and well written, and I really didn't have anything that I had a complaint about. I really just thought it was solid and just well worth reading to anyone who enjoys a good fantasy story. This is definitely one to put on your list. Now finally, at number 1 for fantasy, we have The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. This is the third and final book in the Poppy War trilogy, which is a grimdark Asian-inspired fantasy series that I've really grown to appreciate and love. Of course, keeping this spoiler-free for the entire series, but essentially we follow a young girl named Rin who is very much an underdog and not always the most likable character, and that is what made this third and final book works so well, is that the character work was so well done. There's some incredible development. You will feel for the characters. There are emotional, gut-punching moments, and I was just completely enamored by it. I was pulled in and just needed to know what was going to happen, how it would all come together. I'll say that the ending was very satisfying. It was not predictable, but it really did fit the story, and I ended up being very satisfied with it. Once I sat with it for a while and, kind of held all of my emotions together, I really was very happy with how this trilogy ended, and I thought that it was just a very strong conclusion. If you're considering picking up the series or considering whether or not to finish it, absolutely, it's really one that gets better and better, and I think that this third book is probably the best of the 3. So highly recommend the whole series. It is dark and disturbing and all of the things that I love so much. It's very serious in tone, and it has a lot of really important themes based off of the difficult parts of Chinese history, and it's just one that more people should read. Even honestly, if you don't read a lot of fantasy, I do think it has a lot of wide appeal, and yeah, I just can't stop recommending it. Now, switching over to science fiction, starting at the bottom again, at number 6, we have Repo Virtual by Corey J. White, which follows a man who accepts a job to do a heist where essentially he needs to steal an object from a billionaire. And when he finds out what he has stolen, the story goes from there. And this is a science fiction book I want to highlight because it was just a really solid 4-star read for me and really represented what I love so much about modern sci-fi. So it had fantastic elements of diversity, both in terms of ethnicity and also in terms of queer and sexual representation. And I just thought the heist was very fun. Normally you see heist stories more in fantasy, so I love when they're brought into science fiction. And it also has elements involving artificial intelligence, which is a topic I cannot get enough of when it comes to sci-fi. And I just thought that this was fun and enjoyable, well written, and very satisfying. So definitely one that you might want to check out if you missed it this year. Then at number 5, we have An Unnatural Life by Aaron K. Wagner. This is a sci-fi novella that is set in a future where artificial intelligence have just received legal rights, and with that brings a trial for an artificial intelligence that has been accused of murdering a human being. This story is told from the perspective of a legal representative that gets involved with this AI, and they are trying to help them with their appeal. And so this story involved a few things that I really enjoy. One, again, being artificial intelligence. I love stories that deal with the topic, and this one was very nuanced, very thoughtful. It's very serious in tone, which I do want people to be aware of because there's a lot of like fun AI stories, and this one definitely has a darker setting to it and deals with some darker issues. I also really like the fact that it involves legal cases, and I'm someone who loves courtroom drama and all of that, so I was very much pulled into those details, and I just thought that it was a very reflective little novella that in a short number of pages really said a lot about humanity and us today as people, and it was just very topical, and I don't want to spoil too much, but definitely one to try for yourself if you're at all interested in those topics. Now at number 4, we have Rev, which is the third book in the Machine Dynasty trilogy. Once again, keeping this very spoiler free, but this whole trilogy follows a group of artificial intelligence. You're gonna notice a theme in this video. I promise I have some non-AI stories coming. But this is a series that I like to recommend for those of you like myself that do read a lot of that subgenre and are looking for something different, because these AI are synthetic, they're able to reproduce, and this is just so different than any other AI story I have ever read. I describe these books as very kooky. They just have a really fun narrative pace. They are very action filled, but at the same time, they have really good characters. And to highlight this last book specifically, which is the one that came out in 2020, I will say that the opening chapter was amazing. It was perfect. It pulled me in, and it was possibly one of the best starters to a sci-fi book I've read in a really, really long time. And then from there, I would say that it's very consistent with the other books. You get some good character development, and I thought that it closed out the trilogy in a really satisfying way, so I did want to include it here. Definitely recommend the whole series. You do want to start back at the beginning. This one won't make as much sense on its own, but I'm so happy that this book finally came out, because it was delayed a few times and was definitely one of the better things to come out of 2020. Now at number 3, we have Machine by Elizabeth Bear. This is a story of a doctor that is sent in to investigate a generational ship that is found empty. There is a warning beacon going off, and so the ambulance comes to check out what is happening. But when they get there, everyone seems to be missing, and so her along with her team have to investigate, and the story goes from there. This is one of these stories that is both sci-fi and also mystery, and I love when these two genres cross over together. There's some fantastic hard science in this book. There's also some great character work. I really like the main character of Dr. Jen. She was so relatable. I loved not only her love of coffee, but I just found her to be funny and snarky, and just made the book very enjoyable. So if you were someone like myself that loves a sci-fi mystery, this was just really well done and has made me very interested in reading more of this author's sci-fi work. Now at number 2, we have Finna by Nino Supri, which is a novella that follows a group of employees working at a Scandinavian furniture store where they have to look for a customer that has gone missing, and they realize that this customer has possibly wandered through a portal into another multiverse. This is a sci-fi story that also has elements of horror, because what they find in some of these other multiverses aren't always the nicest things, and so the story is primarily told from the perspective of one employee who is sent into these multiverses with their ex-partner, who is someone who is non-binary, and they have to deal with the aftermath of their relationship while battling ravenous furniture. This book was so much fun, and I was just so entertained reading it. It brings together the elements of sci-fi and horror that I love so much in a fun and creative way, and also brings in diversity in a very comfortable and relatable way. I think the conversations they had really wove into the plot in a very natural way, and despite how silly this sounds, it actually ends with a lot of emotional pull, and I really did think that this book has a good level of seriousness or depth to it, which I didn't expect from this book, and really punched it up a notch when it comes to my rating and reviews. This is a book that is just as good as it sounds, and I would love for you to check it out if you haven't already. Now we've made it to the number 1 spot, so my favorite science fiction book, but also my favorite SFF book I read that was published in 2020, without a doubt, is The Relentless Moon by Mary Robinette Kowal. This is a piece of historical science fiction that is set in a world where the space program had to be accelerated due to orbital issues that are causing people to have to get off of Earth in a much accelerated timeline from what we currently have predicted. And so with that, we follow a female astronaut named Nicole, who is a fantastic protagonist, and in this book she is sent off to the moon. There is a mystery going on because they worry that there are people trying to go and work against the spacefaring efforts, and so she is trying to track down who is behind this conspiracy. And once again, I love when science fiction blends together with mystery, and so you have her on the moon sleuthing around, trying to pick up clues, trying to figure out who is guilty, who is suspicious, and I love those elements. This book also has fantastic elements of hard science fiction, because you do learn a lot about space travel, what it means and involves to be an astronaut, and I really enjoyed those elements. There's always great diversity in her work, and what I actually loved so much, which other reviewers may not highlight as much, is the fact that the main character has previously suffered with an eating disorder, and at the point of this book is somewhat in recovery, but is still trying to prevent a relapse. And as someone myself with a complicated relationship with food and disordered eating, this book really hit home to me, and I'll be honest that it really gave me the knock on the head I needed to really get my own food issues under control and get things properly in place. So it really pushed me to further my own recovery, and if that's something that you're interested in hearing more about, please let me know in the comments. I've thought about doing a separate video on the topic that would be, of course, non-book related, so let me know. But this book spoke to me on so many levels, and it told a story that I don't think it's told in enough books, particularly not in science fiction. And above that, even if you don't have that personal connection, again, this book is well plotted. The character work is amazing, and I love the science in this. At the end, the author does provide further detail on the science behind everything that was written into her fictional story, and I loved every minute of this one. Highly recommend. Absolutely worth reading. Honestly, you should go back to the beginning and read the first two books first, but carry on and read this third book. It is fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough and would love to discuss it with more people online. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of fantasy, science fiction, as well as horror and thrillers. I would also love to hear from all of you. What was the best book that you read that was published in 2020, whether it be fantasy or science fiction or even something else? I would love to also hear of the books I mentioned. Which ones are you most interested in checking out for yourself? Also, you can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online, and hitting that notification bell. Don't forget to check out my other Best of the Year videos. I'm going to have them linked again in the cards and the description box in case you missed any. Otherwise, I will talk to you again soon. Thanks, Kate. Bye-bye.